Hey YouTube, welcome back to Junk Bucket Garage. Today we're going to do the part 2 video of the Dodge Fart. We previously went through a bunch of troubleshooting and fixing small things. This car is going on a project for a show that's being filmed. I happened to get lucky enough to fall into a place where they asked me to help work on the car. Don't know what to do with my hands. The car ran real good. So we troubleshot, we fixed a lot of things, and then we're still running into problems. We took it back up to a shoot and the car failed to perform. And the problem that we're running into is when the car warms up to operating temperature, it stops running. And it's definitely an ignition problem. There is a small fuel problem, but in this episode we address that ignition problem and we actually find it, and it's some pretty good information for all of you old car guys out there. You won't want to miss this. Check it out. Well, we took the car to the movie set and it did not fail to fail. So I'm trying to fix a few things and get it running right. I found a couple of issues. One issue was on these cars that Plymouth did, the coil doesn't use a full 12 volts. It uses like 5 or 6 volts or something, and so you got a 12 volt wire that runs to a ballast resistor, which is here, and then that reduces the voltage that goes out to the coil. Well, what the person who put this car together, they put a coil on that's internally regulated or internally resisted, so it needs full 12 volts to run right. I don't even know how it was running because it wasn't getting 12 volts at all. So I bought a new coil that is also internally resisted. It takes a 12 volt power source, key on and on start, and I bypassed this ballast resistor, so now the wire that goes to the coil is a full 12 volts. Well, I put my voltometer meter reader fire on there, and that's only 10.5 or 10.6 volts. I think it's enough. I'm going to try it. If it gives me any more fits, I'll just put a switch in place, or I'll put a relay in series so that it gets a full 12 volts. But I'm going to try it the way it is. The other thing I did is, I think I showed you before, that distributor, somebody stripped the screws out on that vacuum canister so it was moving around. I wasn't really able to fix that. It did it again. So I went down for $100 and I just bought a points type small block Chrysler distributor. And so this car doesn't need to rev up real high. It doesn't need to do burnouts. These points are going to run just fine. So one of the problems could have been this ballast resistor, when it got hot, was dropping voltage, and you know, once it dropped so much voltage, it just wouldn't fire the coil that needed 12 volts to run, that wasn't getting it to begin with. I'm pretty confident that was our problem. We're gonna find out. How do I do this? It's not doing it. So my brother-in-law is a Mopar guy, and he just told me that another issue that could be causing this to only have 10 volts is that voltage regulator over there, which makes a lot of sense, and he's probably right. I'm gonna do the right thing, and I'm gonna run this with the 10 volts to the coil. And if that voltage regulator drops current and it starts misfiring again, instead of replacing the voltage regulator, oh no. Instead of replacing the voltage regulator, I am going to just run a jumper wire from the battery to a switch, and then from the switch to the coil, and then that switch will be 12 volt power to the coil. I'll put a fuse right by the battery in case something happens, it'll blow the fuse. And then every time you hit that switch, it'll have 12 volt power and will bypass all of this good Mopar shenanigans. All right, now we're talking.
Hours later.
All right, where's my automatic bolt turner fire? I can't be turning bolts and all this crazy nonsense when I have power to do it for me.
More power.
I have the power to turn the bolt.
Vroom, vroom.
So on a points type ignition, all you need is, depending on the vehicle, so on these cars, if you have the coil that's not internally regulated, you're going to need the ballast resistor to lower the voltage, and then that lower voltage wire will go to the positive side of the coil, and then all your points are doing are grounding this wire that goes to the negative side of the coil. So that power side charges the coil up with all the energies, and then when the points make contact and ground this wire, it collapses the field, forces all that energy to fire out of that lightning hose into the distributor, and then the distributor puts it out to the cylinder. So when it comes to simplicity, it doesn't get any better than points. And if you have a coil that's internally regulated or whatever, a 12 volt coil, you can just run 12 volts. So all you need is a wire that supplies 12 volts when the key's on and in start. You got to make sure, I've seen that happen. A lot of these old cars, this one, my Torino, you'll find a wire that's powered when the key's in the run position, but when you go to start it, that wire drops power. So you can't start your car, and you can't figure out why. You have to have 12 volt power in run and on start to the positive side of the coil, your points ignition distributor to the negative side of the coil. That's it. Car should run. That's assuming that the points are working correctly and the distributor is working correctly, which we're gonna assume it is.
Just put that wherever.
And you know, people are down on points. They want electronics and all this fancy stuff, but you know, you can work on a points ignition in the middle of nowhere. You can't do that quite as much with electronic stuff. So this wire here is going to be our, supposed to be 12 volts. It's only like 10.6 volts. I think that's good enough. We're going to do it anyway. Oh, no, don't even do that to me. Go on. You know you want to. Yep. Alrighty. Just get those a little snug. Now, before I go any further, it should be pretty close to being in the right position for the timing. I you know, check the alignment of everything when I drop this new distributor in. Before I go any further, I just want to make sure that everything's working correctly. So I'm going to put the coil wire from the coil to the distributor, and when those points collapse the field here, it's going to discharge the power that it's getting from this power wire and it's going to fire down that coil wire into the distributor, then no random, or no particular hole. I'm just going to put a wire on one of these spark plug things here and put a spark plug in the end of it and just crank it and make sure that plug's firing. As long as that's happening, the ignition system should be completed right now. What did I do with the coil wire? It's blue. It looks just like this. Can you find it? Okay, so that should be the coil wire. Check. Now I'm gonna pull this plug wire out. I'm gonna pull this plug wire out. I said I'm gonna, there it goes, okay. This is actually number one. This should be the number one hole. I don't know, for whatever, posterity. And I have a spark plug here somewhere.
In that box?
Where'd it go?
Full of spark plugs.
There's a Parks plug. I'm gonna hook that up. And then I'm just gonna ground this somewhere. That looks like a good spot. Now we're just gonna crank the engine and we should see a nice big spark arc across there. I'm gonna have you crank it for me. You have to put it in neutral because the neutral safety switch isn't working right. So make sure you hold the brake really good. Here, this will help. Go ahead and start it. Stop. Big, beautiful spark. Hooray! So now that's a simple points ignition. I'm eliminating anything that could be causing an issue in the distributor coil area. I'm getting a good high orange, blue spark, whatever color's better. And now I just need to hook that shit all back up. We're good to go. Just remember, don't do what happened here. Make sure you know what your coil is. Does it need to be, is it 6 volts or does it need 12 volts? And if it needs 6 volts, then you need to run a ballast resistor or some kind of resistor. If it needs a full 12 volts and you run that, you're choking the coil. You're not giving it enough power. And I think that is why we were having trouble. This car would start and run, which after seeing this issue here, I'm really surprised that it did start and run. But as soon as it would warm up, the voltage out of that would drop. That's just a spring inside there that lowers the voltage as it passes through that spring and it heats up. I think that was heating up and the voltage was dropping and it wasn't supplying enough to run a coil that needed 12 volts to operate. Okay. So, ow, I hit my knee. So now we're going to change these spark plugs, which is going to be fun because those two are tucked behind the header. And then we're going to plug it all back in. And
We're good.
What's that?
My phone.
Did you forget I was filming?
Or I forgot where my phone was.
I found it.
Cool, thanks.
Found your phone.
What happened?
And there's a white mark down there on that harmonic balancer now, so I should be able to see the timing mark and actually put a timing light on this and set the timing. I got shade. That'll help me. When I set the timing on this, I'm not gonna worry about setting idle and timing it idle. I'm gonna rev it up to 3,000 RPM, full advance on the distributor, set it to 30 degrees, let it idle, and then I'll do all the rest of the adjustment with the carburetor because then I'll be pretty confident that the timing's in a good spot. I did buy an Edelbrock carburetor for this. After seeing these issues that we're having with the ignition, I don't think the carburetor was ever an issue. So we might try it with this Holley carburetor and just see what happens. I need my spark plug. Show you this. And I need this for the extension with the spark plug socket on it right there. I need to go get a water.
Yes, please. Ooh, nice and hot. Fudging. I said fudging.
So it started and ran good. I may have accidentally laid a wire on the header and burned it up. That went to the electric choke, which blew a fuse, and fuses can be hard to get to, so you got to have your helper get them. Here's a new one. Thank you. And just by ear, hearing the motor run, I'm confident that we solved the problem. It's already running better than it ever has since I've seen the car. So I'm pretty sure, not 100%, but I know the distributor was an issue with that stripped out screws. Whoever put the electronic module in there to replace the points over tightened the screws on the vacuum canister and stripped them out, so that was moving around, changing the timing. And then they had a 12-volt coil on it, still running the ballast resistor, which was not putting enough current to the coil. So now I'm gonna have her hit the key. I'm gonna make sure I got 12 volts to that choke wire, since I burned it up. You want to just turn the key on, babe? Oh. Start it. Done. Okay. And there's that same issue, but we're only getting 10.7 something volts. But now I'm gonna let her crank it. We're gonna start it. I'm gonna wait till it warms up enough for the choke to open. I revved it up until the distributor was at full advance, set it at 29 degrees. That's pretty conservative, but that's idling around. I'm fine with that. We're gonna start it. We're gonna let it warm up until the choke opens, and then once the choke's open, I'm gonna adjust the carburetor where I'm idling at about 800, 850 RPM, and we should be good to go. Go ahead, neutral, hold the brake, and start it.
Hold the brake, start it.
Just turn the key, yeah. Hold the gas pedal down about a 1/2 inch and do it and crank it.
Hold on. That was my fault.
Go ahead and start it. That warms up enough where I can have the choke fully open, I'll idle the carburetor back down, and then I'll check those 2 idle screws, set the RPM where it's about 850 or so. And it'll be time to take this piece of junk out and make sure it's going to run a while this time. Well, it's running. Driving it around a little bit, everything seems to be working fine. It's definitely got a burnt valve or two, but there's nothing I can do about that right now. It doesn't seem to be overheating as long as that gauge is working, and I give that about a 20% chance that it's working. But on the plus side, cruddy. Still running though. See if it'll start. Can't argue with it starting like that. I do need to check the voltage on the coil. And then if I still got good voltage to the coil, I think we got that spare carburetor. We'll run the car until it quits running, and then I'll change the carburetor.
Yeah.
Fuel pump problem, because it's only doing it once the car warms up. So as far as ignition timing, as far as the ignition system goes, the car is running great. As soon as you hit the key, it starts. As soon as you shut the key off, it stops. Now the problem we're having is fuel starvation. And once the car warms up, it seems to be not pumping any fuel. That's a mechanical, probably like an Edelbrock. It looks like one of them aftermarket diaphragm type pumps.
I can't see diaphragm on YouTube.
I don't think I'm gonna take that off or mess with it. All I'm gonna do is buy a cheap clickety-clack, I think they're buzz pumps now, whatever, electric pump, and I'll just put a switch in and flip a switch. That'll turn the gas on. It's just got to make it one more night of filming, and I think we can do that. Here's to hoping. So we went out on the test drive. Everything was running good. Ignition, perfect. And it starts lean backfiring and lean sputtering and leaning. And we pull back in, and this little culprit right here, called a fuel filter, while the engine is idling, the fuel filter is completely empty. No fuel in it at all. So I'm thinking the pump is bad. We're gonna have to change the pump, all that stuff. I call my brother-in-law and I say, come on man, just give me a simple fix. Help me out here, what could it be? He said, have you tried taking the gas cap off? It's not a vented tank, or they have the vent plugged or pinched, and this is not a vented cap. So after you run it for a little bit, there's no vent, and the tank can't release any fuel because it can't draw any vented air in anywhere. So I take the cap off, hit the key, and it immediately fills the fuel filter up, and everything's good to go. So there's our comedy of errors. We're gonna try on the way there tomorrow to get a vented gas cap, and if that don't work, I'm gonna just drill a hole in that gas cap or leave it off or something, and then we should be good. All right guys, hope you enjoyed the video. The car actually ran great. It worked fine. It did what it was supposed to do. They let it idle forever, run forever. It went back to his owner. He fired it up and drove it around. He's very happy with it. There's a chance we might see that car again, but it's a very slim chance. So hopefully the owner got back a better car than he sent out, and everybody's happy. And we got a lot of project cars coming up, some late model stuff, some really old school stuff, some cool muscle car stuff. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends, your grandma, your dog's groomer, and just help a guy out, man. We're all just poor folk trying to be hot rodders. Catch you next time.